3, starting a new chapter today, chapter 8, and we'll cover texts 1 to 9. So let us go through and read all the translations first, and then we will come back to text 2. Yeah, we'll come back to text 2 to read the Sanskrit and Prabhupada's purport. All right, would someone like to read? Is there a mic?
Yes, text 1. The great sage Maitreya Muni said to Vidura, the royal dynasty of King Puru is worthy to serve the pure devotees because all of the descendants of that family are devoted to the personality of Godhead. You are also born in that family, and it is wonderful that because of your attempt, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are become newer and newer at every moment.
Next.
Let me now begin speaking on the Bhagavata Purana, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead for the benefit of those who are entangled in the extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure.
Some time ago, being inquisitive to know, Sanat Kumar, the chief of the boy saints, accompanied by other great sages, inquired exactly like you about the truths regarding Vasudeva, the Supreme, from Lord Sankarsana, who is seated at the bottom of the universe.
At that time, Lord Sankarsana was meditating upon his Supreme Lord, whom he learned esteem as Lord Vasudeva. But for the sake of the advancement of the grey learned sages, he slightly opened his lotus-like eyes and began to speak.
The sages came from the highest planet down to the lower region through the water of the Ganges, and therefore the hair on their head was wet. They touched the lotus feet of the Lord, which are worshipped with various paraphernalia by the daughters of the Serpent King when they desire good husbands.
The four Kumaras headed by Sanat Kumar, who all knew the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, glorified the Lord in rhythmic accents with selected words full of affection and love. At that time, Lord Sankarshan, with his thousands of raised hoods, began to radiate an effulgence from the glowing stones on his head.
Lord Sankarsana thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumara, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumara also in his turn, when inquired of by Sankayana Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he has heard it in Sankarsana.
The great sage Sankhayana was the chief amongst the transcendentalists, and when he was describing the glories of the Lord in terms of Srimad Bhagavatam, it so happened that my spiritual master Parashar and Brahaspati both heard him.
Okay, last one.
The great sage Parashar, as aforementioned, began so, advised by the great sage Pulatsya, spoke unto me the foremost of the Puranas, Bhagavatam. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you are always my faithful follower.
All right. So now let's go back to text 2. We'll do the Sanskrit. Okay. Soham nrinam kshula sukhaya dukam mahadgatanam viramaya tasya pravartaye bhagavatam puranam Yadaha Sakshad Bhagavan Rishibhya Soham Nrinam Kshula Sukhaya Dukam Mahad Gatanam Viramaya Tasya Pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam Yadaha Sakshad Bhagavan Rishibhyaha Let's chant. Soham Nrinam Kshula Sukhaya Dukam Mahad Gatanam Viramaya Tasya Pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam Yadaha Sakshad Bhagavan Rishi Mahad Gatanam Viramaya Tasya Pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam Yadaha Sakshad Bhagavan Rishibhya Soham Nrinam Kshula Sukhaya Dukam Mahad Gatanam Viramaya Tasya Pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam Yadaha Sakshad Bhagavan Rishabhya. The man. Soham Nrinam Kshula Sukhaya Dukam Mahad Gatanam Viramaya Tasya Pravartaye Bhagavatam Puranam Yadaha Sakshad Bhagavan Rishibhya. All right, let's do the word for word together. My apologies for starting that so low. Sa, that. Aham, I. Nrinam, of the human being. Kshula, very little. Sukhaya, for happiness. Dukam, distress. Mahat, great. Gatanam, entered into. Viramaya, for mitigation. Tasya, his. Pravartaye, in the beginning. Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam. Puranam, Vedic supplement. Yat, which. Aha, said. Sakshad, directly. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Rishibhya, unto the sages. So translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Let me now begin speaking on the Bhagavat Purana, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead for the benefit of those who are entangled in extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. Please repeat. Let me now begin speaking on the Bhagavat Purana, which was directly spoken to the great sages by the personality of Godhead for the benefit of those who are entangled in extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. Purport. The sage Maitreya proposed to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam because it was especially compiled and traditionally comes down in the disciplic succession for the solution of all problems of human society. Only one who is fortunate can have the opportunity to hear Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of pure devotees of the Lord. Under the spell of material energy, the living entities are entrapped in the bondage of many difficulties, simply for the sake of a little bit of material happiness. They engage in fruitive activities, not knowing the implications. Under the false impression that the body is the self, the living entities foolishly relate to so many false attachments. They think that they can engage with materialistic paraphernalia forever. This gross misconception of life is so strong that a person suffers continually, life after life, under the external energy of the Lord. If one comes in contact with the book Bhagavatam, as well as the devotee Bhagavat, who knows what the Bhagavatam is, then such a fortunate man gets out of the material entanglement. Therefore, Sri Maitreya Muni, out of compassion for the suffering men of the world, proposes to speak on the Srimad Bhagavatam first and last. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, in the last section that we covered yesterday, we heard so many questions that Vidura was posing to Maitreya. Please tell me about this and tell me about that. It was like 20 verses, and it was all, tell me about this, tell me about that. It was just all of his questions. So now, Maitreya, he's preparing to speak, to answer all of those questions. And so the first thing that he does in text 1 is that he glorifies Vidura, the questioner. So, in speaking transcendental knowledge, the speaker is glorious, the hearers are glorious, and the content is also glorious. So everything is glorious. And in fact, it's said that, like in a class, like the Srimad Bhagavatam class, the audience is more important than the speaker, because without the speaker, you can still have some discussions amongst yourselves. But without the audience, the speaker's useless. So he's glorifying Vidura because he's a qualified audience. And he's a qualified hearer of Bhagavatam. And he's not only glorifying Vidura, but he's saying your whole dynasty, the royal dynasty of King Puru, is worthy. Because all of the descendants of that family are devoted to Krishna. And you're also born in that family. So it's very wonderful that you are here trying to understand the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. So, first thing, he glorifies Vidura. And then in the next verse, he glorifies the Bhagavatam. So that's the verse that we just read, text 2. He's glorifying that this Bhagavatam is such a great work that, and it's been compiled, it's been spoken originally by the Supreme Personality of Godhead just for the benefit of these poor creatures in this material world, that's us, who are entangled in extreme miseries for the sake of very little pleasure. So people are, engaging in so many activities, thinking that they're going to be happy through those activities, and they may get a little bit of fleeting, temporary sense pleasure, but compared to the pleasure that they're supposed to get in the spiritual world with Krishna, it's just like nothing. It's like, a drop of water in the desert, Prabhupada said. You're in this desert and you get a drop of water in your hand, and you're thinking you're going to be happy by that drop of water, but before you can even sip it, it evaporates because it's so hot. So, and then you're just plunged again into hopelessness and despair. So that's our situation here in material life. But the Bhagavatam is giving us the nectar for which we're always anxious. It's giving us knowledge of who we really are and where we're meant to be and how to get there. And not only are we going to be happy when we get there, but we're happy along the way, because the process is susukam kartum avyayam. It's joyfully performed. Especially following in the line of Lord Chaitanya, Kevala Ananda Kanda. Everything that you do in the movement of Lord Chaitanya is just blissful. So as soon as we receive the message of Bhagavatam, which was propagated by Lord Chaitanya, then already we can begin to get a higher taste for spiritual pleasure. And that taste impels us on and on in devotional service until ultimately we're just totally blissed out at the lotus feet of Krishna. So so he glorifies Vidura, he glorifies the Bhagavatam, the subject matter, and now he's going to explain how he received this knowledge. So he basically describes his own disciplic succession, the disciplic succession through which he heard the Bhagavatam. So he says it all started out with Lord Sankarshan. So Sankarshan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's a plenary expansion of the Lord, and he spoke directly to who? The four Kumaras, headed by Sanat Kumara, and then the Sanat Kumars passed that knowledge on to. This is a hard one. Whoa, good memory. See, brahmachari life. It's good for the memory, Prabhupada said. Sankyayana Muni. And then Sankyayana Muni explained Bhagavatam to who? Parashara, and Brihaspati was also there. And Parashara was the one who spoke to? No. Yeah. Maitreya. Parashara spoke to Maitreya, and now Maitreya is about to speak. So he's saying that you're glorious for asking. This knowledge itself is glorious, and I have received this knowledge from my guru, Parashara Muni, who received it from his guru, Sankyayana Muni, who received it from his guru, Sanat Kumar, who received it directly from Lord Sankarshan himself. So therefore I'm qualified to speak, and that's on that basis I'm going to speak. And then the next section, tomorrow's class, he's going to start going straight into the process of creation, which was one of the things that Vidura asked. So it's interesting here that by explaining the disciplic succession through which he received the knowledge, he does a couple of things. First thing he does is he establishes his authority to speak. And then the second thing he does is that he gives credit to the previous acharyas. He gives credit to where credit is due. So in speaking transcendental knowledge, or in basically doing anything in Krishna consciousness, the mood of a devotee is very humble, but at the same time, there's a sense of empowerment. So there's this dynamic interplay between humility and empowerment in a devotee's life. So it's like, yes, I'm going to speak, not because I'm intelligent, but because I've heard from authority. Or, yes, I will lead, I will take a leadership position, not because I'm great, but because I am following great leaders, and I can follow in their footsteps. I'm faithfully following in their footsteps. So like that, like Prabhupada said, with all humility at my command. His humility was that he was willing to be an instrument of the Lord and accept the Lord's empowerment. So this is an important principle, that, humility doesn't mean that, oh, I'm useless, I can't do anything, I could never give a class, I could never be a leader, I could never do anything really important. No, humility is, yeah, I can't, but I can accept knowledge from those who have it, and I can pass that on. I can accept, a position and be guided by those who know how to lead, and I can do it as a service. So we have to accept this empowerment with humility, because the disciplic succession needs to continue, right? Just like we had our temple president, Nityananda Prabhu, just retired. So, but the temple needs to go on. Things need to happen. Management of the temple needs to continue, and therefore there's a successor. Now we have Nrsingarupa Prabhu, and he's, being guided by senior devotees, and he's been raised in this community. So life goes on. That's the point. And so disciplic succession, it literally means that. Or, disciplic succession is Prabhupada's translation of Guru Parampara. And the word Parampara literally means one following the other. The Sanskrit word you can see just by the what's the word? The syntax of the word. Param, para. So para means another. So it's param, from one, to para, another. It is one following the other. So it doesn't stop at any point. We see here Sankarshan, Sanat Kumar, Sankyayana Muni, Parashara Muni, Maitreya, Vidura, and then Vidura also instructs Dhritarashtra, and I'm sure others. So in this section, in the purport to text 9, Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport. He says that Srimad Bhagavatam was being narrated from time immemorial by the disciplic succession, even before the time of Vyasadeva. So this is very interesting because we think that, we hear how Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam. So how is the Bhagavatam being narrated even before the time of Vyasadeva? And the point is that this knowledge is eternal. Bhagavatam is eternal. It's ever existing. It's existed since time immemorial. And it was spoken previously. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, but he's also saying, I spoke this to the sun god millions of years ago. So someone might think, well, how is he speaking to the sun god? This is like in the context of the battle of Kurukshetra and all that. And it's like, no, okay, maybe there were some differences. Maybe the chapter 1 with the observing the armies on Kurukshetra wasn't there, but the essence of the knowledge, the essence of the instructions was the same. So in the same way, there may be some differences in some superficial differences in the Bhagavatam that we've gotten from Vyasadeva, from the Bhagavatam that Maitreya passed on to Vidura, but the essence is the same. And the great thing about our Bhagavatam is that it's actually a compilation of all the Bhagavatams that were previously spoken. So we have Maitreya's instructions to Vidura in this Bhagavatam. We have, Shukadeva Goswami's instructions to Maharaj Parikshit. And we also have Sutta Goswami's instructions to the sages of Naimisharanya. And there are some differences in the context of the presentation, the style of the presentation, but the essence of all of them is the same. So that's, the idea is that the knowledge is eternal. And it's passed on. So we're hearing here of one ancient disciplic succession, which maybe is new to many of us. We didn't know that, there was this disciplic succession from Lord Sankarshan down to Vidura. And Krishna also mentions another very ancient succession in the Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone know what that is? Yeah, the first verse of chapter 1, he says, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavam aham avyayam. That I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan. So there he says that avyayam means imperishable. So never was there a time when this knowledge did not exist. never is there a time in the future where it will cease to exist. This is eternal, imperishable knowledge. And at different times, it's taught by different teachers to different students and passed on. So then that disciplic succession continues. Vivasvan manave praha manur ikshvak kave bravit. That Vivasvan, the sun god, instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu then in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So someone might wonder, well, where is this disciplic succession now? Why don't we hear about this parampara, or sampradaya that comes from the sun god, or the sampradaya that comes from Sankarshan? So Krishna also explains that in the Bhagavad Gita when he's in the next verse. He says, "Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo vidu sakale neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa." That in course of time, he says, this science is received through the chain of disciplic succession, through the parampara, and so many saintly kings and others heard it in this way. But in course of time, disciplic successions sometimes become broken, and the science as it is appears to be lost. So in that case, what happens? Then Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya, glanir bhavati bharata, abhutanama dharmasya, taratmanam shrijamyaham. He says, whenever there's a decline of religion, now whenever there's no access to genuine transcendental knowledge through disciplic succession, then I come and I restart the disciplic succession, or I send someone to restart the disciplic succession. So this is what happens. And so that's why we get many disciplic successions throughout human history on this planet and on other planets throughout the universe as well. And so now in Kali Yuga, we have 4 bona fide disciplic successions, or 4 sampradayas, Vaishnava sampradayas. And those are, well, first of all, they're all Vaishnava sampradayas, which is significant because Vaishnava means one who worships Vishnu or Krishna. And so we are we are Vaishnavas. We call ourselves Vaishnavas because we worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are other groups in the Vedic line who aren't Vaishnavas. They worship different Shaktis of the Lord, like they'll worship Durga or Kali, or they'll worship demigods like Lord Shiva, or Ganesh, like that. But Vaishnav Sampradayas are those who worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And so right now, currently, there are 4 Sampradayas, and they all begin from the Lord Himself. But the Lord imparts His instructions to certain personalities who become leaders of the Sampradaya. And the disciplic succession continues from them. So in one case, the Lord spoke to Brahma. So from Brahma, we have the Brahma Sampradaya. Another case, Lord Vishnu spoke to Lakshmi. And from Lakshmi, we get the Shri Sampradaya. Then Krishna at another time instructed Lord Shiva, and so we get the Rudra Sampradaya. And then the 4th one is the Lord instructed the Kumaras, and we get the Kumara Sampradaya. So those have their lineage. Maybe you can put up at the end of the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, there's the list of our Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. We can see it. So these sampradayas, they're all Vaishnava sampradayas, and although there are some slight differences between the philosophies, they're all basically the same. You could compare it to like in a family. There are the parents, and then they have children. Their children grow up and get married and have their children, and then they live separately from the parents, and they live separately from each other, right? There's one son with his daughter and their children over here, and then there's a daughter with her husband and their children over here. So they grow up a little, they live separately, but they're all connected to the parents. So in the same way, there are these lines of 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas, and so just like the nuclear families, they may have slightly different lifestyles depending on their careers, their personalities, and just their lifestyle choices. And they may have disagreements about things with their fellow, some slight things with their in-laws or their, brothers, families, and the way they do things, right? That's kind of like normal in families, right? Like, I don't agree with the way my sister's raising her children or whatever, So there are these slight differences. But for the important things, they agree, right? At the end of the day, they care about each other, they love each other, they come together, they discuss things. So, in the same way, there are these different lines, but we're all Vaishnavas. So when we come together, we can still talk about Krishna, the important things, even though we may disagree on some minor things, but it's not a big issue, and we just keep a healthy distance from each other, and we go on happy with mutual respect. So, we can look a little bit at this, our disciplic succession. Actually, one thing I wanted to bring up is that I like the way Prabhupada translates Guru Parampara as disciplic succession, because it puts an emphasis on the disciple, on disciplehood. Because actually, to be a guru, one needs to be a disciple. That's the main qualification of a guru, is that they have a guru and that they strictly follow their guru. And by following their guru, they become qualified to become a guru. So the first qualification of a guru is that they are a disciple. So Prabhupada, he calls it the disciplic succession, and that puts the emphasis on the disciplehood, that, I'm a disciple of my guru, and my guru is a disciple of his guru, and he's also a disciple of his guru, so it's a succession of disciples. We can see it like that. So, go ahead and just show so it starts off with Krishna and then goes on to Brahma. So this is the Brahma Sampradaya, and then Brahma instructed Narada, Narada to Vyas, Vyas to Madhva. So Madhva Acharya, he's called the Sampradaya Acharya. Because, Krishna, he's very concerned about disciplic succession, because Krishna's mission is to bring all the conditioned souls back to Godhead, and in order for that to happen, there has to be access to transcendental knowledge, and not only the knowledge, but there has to be, there's the book Bhagavat, but there also has to be the person Bhagavat. There has to be a living person to give the knowledge, to teach the knowledge, to train the disciple, to answer their questions and guide them personally in their lives. So the teachings may be there, but Krishna also, he's very keen to make sure that there's also a living representative of the tradition. And so he maintains the disciplic succession by sometimes sending empowered personalities from the spiritual world to be to strongly represent or to reinvigorate the succession when it may be waning. So all of the four sampradayas have their sampradaya acharya, and so for Brahma sampradaya is Madhva acharya, and then he has his disciples. So what we see here, the numbers, because actually there are only, how many? There's like 32 or 33 numbers here, but we're talking from the time of creation, so obviously there are many disciples and gurus who are skipped in between these. And there's also a lot of horizontal movement, because it's not that, for example, it's not that Madhavendra Puri only had one disciple, or it's not that Narada Muni only had one disciple. The main one given is Vyasadeva, but Narada, he also instructed Dhruva Maharaj, he instructed Prahlad, he instructed Mrigari, the hunter, he instructed so many people, he instructed even Yudhisthira. Those are just the examples that we have in the Bhagavatam. But surely Narada Muni traveled all over the universe. He instructed hundreds and thousands of personalities. So the disciplic successions also branch out. Let's say Narada instructed Prahlad, and Prahlad instructed his classmates at school, and one of those classmates really took chanting Hare Krishna seriously and taught it to someone else. There could be a whole disciplic succession from Prahlad, right? But that's not shown here. So what we see are the prominent acharyas in our line. So it goes down like that. And then the interesting thing about the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya is that at one point, Lord Chaitanya appears within our Sampradaya. And he does so for the purpose of adjusting something, or perfecting the teachings of the Sampradaya. And he brings in the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. Before that, the philosophy was called Vishishta Dvaita, which means qualified dualism, that the Lord and the jivas are two. We don't merge and become one, but we're two. And we exist eternally as separated individuals, so that there's the servant and the served, so that we continue with service. But Lord Chaitanya, there was more of an emphasis on the dualism, that we're separate from Krishna. But Lord Chaitanya wanted to point out how actually there's also a oneness. It's not that we're just separate. There's also a oneness, because we're qualitatively one. We are parts and parcels of Krishna, just like the drop of water from the ocean is qualitatively one. So we're also like Krishna Satchit Ananda. He's eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. We're also eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. So, and we have a oneness of interest. Krishna has a mission, and we also have the same mission. So Lord Chaitanya, he inaugurated the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, that we're inconceivably, simultaneously one and different. And Lord Chaitanya also integrated key elements of all four sampradayas into the Brahma Madhva. And after the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, the sampradaya became known as the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. Gaudiya refers to Gaudadesh, which is the geographical location where Lord Chaitanya appeared, the sort of greater Navadvip area. So that's our disciplic succession. Our spiritual family tree, you could say, is here. It's the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. It's the teachings that came from Krishna to Lord Brahma, which were very firmly established later, thousands of years later, by Madhva Acharya, and which another, thousands of years later were updated by Lord Chaitanya, the Lord himself. And that became the perfection of all knowledge. So we're very well situated within the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, coming down. And then we have, the more recent acharyas, the 6 Goswamis who are directly instructed by Lord Chaitanya, and then their followers of Krishnadas Kaviraj, Narottam Das Thakur, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So all of these, what's interesting is that, because we see how the parampara, it continues. It's a succession. It keeps going and keeps going, so that there's always a living representative of Krishna on the planet for us to actually meet and talk to and ask questions to. And Krishna wants this to continue, and he makes sure that it continues. He sends people to make sure it continues. He empowers people to make sure it continues. But there are some people that actually try to stop the disciplic succession. So this actually happens in our times, that within ISKCON, a group came up, they're known as the Ritviks, and they proposed this philosophy, which is a deviant philosophy, that the disciplic succession ended with Srila Prabhupada. And after Prabhupada, there can be no more Diksha Gurus. So there's no longer a living link, Diksha link, in disciplic succession. So in one sense, I get it, where they're coming from, because this philosophy was invented back in the maybe late 80s, early 90s, when a lot of the ISKCON gurus were having challenges, and some of them were falling down and leaving the practice of bhakti completely. So a lot of people lost faith in all ISKCON gurus. They thought, oh, none of them are qualified. Only Prabhupada is qualified. They felt like the only one that they can actually put their faith in is Prabhupada. So then they thought, forget it. Just take it for granted that none of Prabhupada's disciples are actually qualified to be gurus, and we're just going to take initiation from Prabhupada now on, forever forward. But what's wrong with that? What's the problem with saying, yeah, Prabhupada is a guru for forever, for the rest of eternity into the future? Yes, Esther.
He taught other people so that they could teach other people, and if you stop it there when he's gone, then it stops the movement, and that was his goal, was to keep everything going, so he wouldn't be happy.
Exactly, yeah. Srila Prabhupada said, he said, I actually have some quotes here. He says, I want to see my disciples become bona fide spiritual masters and spread Krishna consciousness very widely. That will make me and Krishna very happy. Keep trained up very rigidly, and then you are a bona fide guru, and you can accept disciples on the same principle. So, yeah, and Prabhupada says, but as a matter of etiquette, it's the custom that during the lifetime of your spiritual master, you bring the prospective disciples to him, and in his absence or disappearance, you can accept disciples without any limitation. That is the law of disciplic succession. So Prabhupada's saying that I want you to do this. I want you to be qualified and become gurus. So that will make me very happy, and it'll make Krishna very happy. Why? Because Krishna wants this to go on. He doesn't want it to stop. What are some other reasons? Yeah, Jopi.
There's the book Bhagavat and then the person Bhagavat. You need a living person.
Yeah, you need a living person, because if the person's no longer here, how will you know if they even accepted you as their disciple? Yes, I'm going to take initiation from Prabhupada. Like, Prabhupada, the guru has to actually, say, okay, I accept you as my disciple. You can't just say, all right, he's my guru, and that's it. The guru needs to accept, and the guru also needs to instruct, because it's a personal relationship. Like every person, we're all individuals, we all have our own struggles, we all have our own, situations in life. And so we need a living person who can know us individually and who can give us that personal guidance. Kamala, you had your hand up? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it's kind of offensive to Prabhupada to say that Prabhupada was so spiritually impotent that he wasn't able to make even one of his disciples qualified to become a guru. And so if that's the case, if you're saying that Prabhupada is that spiritually impotent, why would you even want to take initiation from Srila Prabhupada? So it's very heavy, actually, right? It's very offensive, not only to ISKCON gurus, who many of whom are very qualified, but also to Srila Prabhupada, that he's not capable of making a bona fide guru. Any other reasons anyone can think of? Yeah.
I guess if you can take initiation from previous Acharya, what's stopping you from going to Lord Chaitanya, to Brahma, to Krishna himself? Yeah, whatever. I mean, why, go for the highest. Don't mess around with the middleman. Just go straight to Krishna and, conduct your initiation ceremony. So it just becomes absurd. It gets into the realm of absurdity. So one of the, go ahead, Prabhu. Yeah. Right. So Prabhu is saying that this is a movement. We call ourselves the Hare Krishna movement because it has to keep moving. It's not gonna. It doesn't stop. It can't just we can't just stop at one point. This has to go on for the next 10,000 years. And yeah.
Serve the living Guru and get instructions from that Guru. So he himself done that by his own example, by accepting Sanjitani Muni as his Guru. Yeah. So Krishna personally says, approach a Guru, right? You have to approach a person. How are you going to approach somebody that's not here anymore? And then inquire submissively. How are we going to ask questions to somebody who's not here anymore? And then render service to the person. Because we can serve Prabhupada's mission, but we can't do personal service to Prabhupada anymore. So there are so many limitations in that philosophy. It really restricts us, It makes the knowledge very difficult to access and to be sure about. Whereas if you have a living guru, you can go straight to the person and get it right from the guru's mouth and be clear about what we're doing. There's an argument that could be raised, though, that Prabhupada's books are here. We have Prabhupada's books. All of his instructions are there in his books. The knowledge is there in his books, so we have perfect access to knowledge through those books. So, considering that argument, we could say, well, Krishna also gave us books, right? He gave us the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Brahma, he gave us books. He gave us the Brahma Samhita, which has all spiritual knowledge about the material and spiritual worlds in it. Narada gave us books. He gave us the Narada Bhakti Sutra, the Narada Pancharatra. Srila Vyasadeva, he gave us a lot of books, right? The Bhagavatam, the Mahabharata, the Vedanta Sutra. The Goswamis, they gave us countless books. Krishnadas Kaviraj, he gave us books, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Govinda Lilamrita. Narottam Das Thakur, he included the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness in his songs. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur wrote tons of books. He was a great scholar. He wrote books, commentaries on Shastras. Baladev Vidyabhushan, he wrote the Govinda Bhasya, which is the Gaudiya Vaishnava commentary on Vedanta Sutra. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote books, he wrote songs, he has so many teachings. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wrote books and commentaries. And then Srila Prabhupada also wrote so many books and commentaries. So we're seeing that the books were already there. So why didn't any one of those links in the disciplic succession say, oh, we already have books, I don't need to be a guru, I don't need to write new books, I don't need to teach anything new. Every single link practically wrote their own books, even though their guru had already written books. Every single one of them accepted disciples, even though their guru, already had disciples.
So they're continuing. This is what it means to continue. And we also need to continue. So we also need to become qualified, accept Prabhupada's instructions, read Prabhupada's books, imbibe all those instructions, and teach. Become gurus, continue the parampara. And also we need to write books. So, and we need to actually write books on the science of Krishna consciousness. There are many Prabhupada's disciples have written, their biographies of Srila Prabhupada, speaking about their memories of Prabhupada. And some of them have also written philosophical books. It's very important for us to write also philosophical books, and also our own commentaries on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, because as time goes by, it becomes, the knowledge is eternal. The essence of the knowledge never changes, but the world changes. Culture changes, people change. So what was understandable to people 2,000 years ago is no longer understandable to us. If you look at even classic literature like Shakespeare or Chaucer, try to read that now and it's like, you give that to a 20-year-old and they're just like, what? It's like even the meanings, even the dictionary meanings of the words that they use then are different now. If you can do an experiment, get a dictionary from back in the 1800s and look up the meanings of common words that we use today, and the meanings are different. And there's many words that we use today that aren't in that dictionary, and there's many words in that dictionary that we don't use today. So just the language changes. And then also if you look at the analogies, the things that, because we need to make the knowledge relevant to people now in the current context. And if you read something like Patanjali Yoga Sutras, if you look at all the examples that he gives to try to make his points clear, it's all to do with things that people related to back then, like clay pots and fetching water from a river and like that. So we don't fetch water in clay pots anymore, not in America anyway. So it's like we can imagine, okay, this ancient culture, people did this, and okay, I get it. But if you make it relatable to people's everyday experience, it's going to be a lot more accessible. And if you use words that they understand, it's going to be a lot more accessible. So even, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's books, if anyone's tried to read them, it's really hard to understand those. And Prabhupada even says that. There's a quote here. He says, so if you want to understand Bhagavad Gita, then we must understand in the same way as the person who directly heard from. This is parampara system. Suppose I have heard something from my spiritual master, so I speak to you the same thing. This is parampara system. He says, you cannot imagine what my spiritual master said. Even if you read some books, you cannot understand unless you understand it from me. This is called parampara system. You cannot jump over to the superior guru, neglecting the next acharya. You have to accept the immediate current acharya. He says you have to accept the current link. So he's saying that don't try to read my guru's books. You'll never understand them. You have to read my books. So, we're not saying don't read Prabhupada's books, but it's true that many people have difficulty understanding Prabhupada's books, and we need to help people. We need to elucidate what Prabhupada said. We need to pass on the essence of the teachings, the principles that Prabhupada gave us in a way that's relevant and intelligible to people in the world today. And future generations need to do the same thing. They need to understand from us and write it in their own words, in their own language, and using their own examples that people can relate to, because the world will go on changing and it's going to leave us behind. But the disciplic succession needs to go on. The essential knowledge needs to go on so that people can still grasp the principles of bhakti and practice them and go back to Godhead. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions, yes, please. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, very good example. Yeah, actually there's no example in the whole Brahma Sampradaya or any of the four bona fide Sampradayas of anyone taking initiation from a guru who has already left his body, who has already left this world. It's never happened. There's no historical precedent for it. This is like a newly invented thing. So it's just bogus, it's just like, forget it. Yeah, and that's a really good example that Prabhupada could have. And he could have told us, you don't need to take initiation from it. Just, I'll come in your dream and I'll tell you what to do. He didn't say that, even though he experienced that. And even though Prabhupada sometimes does come in our dreams and we can receive instructions that way, but he's still, instructed that you need to take initiation from the current link. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu.
Continue to write their own books, and that's how the way to pass.
Yeah.
But is there a distinction between the Sampradaya Acharya, like Krishna's book, Bhagavad Gita is never old, even though it's been explained again.
Yeah.
Prabhupada is the founder Acharya. So
Yeah.
in terms of, say, the weightage on the foundational books, the Parampara Acharya's books, definitely with contemporary writing, those will become successively, let's say, more prominent in usage. But how about the founder Acharya's book? I mean, do they remain equally important forever, or will the uses of them diminish over time?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, that's a good point that you bring up. So there will be many gurus and disciples, but then there's the Acharya, holds a special prominence within the Sampradaya. So Srila Prabhupada is an Acharya. He's not just a guru, right? And it's interesting because even this list that we have, like I was saying, there are many gurus in between. Like even recently, I didn't bring my Bhagavad Gita. I actually did some research and I looked at, if you use Google, the lifetime of Narottam Das Thakur, lifetime of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, like that, there are many cases where the previous person, the next link, the next Acharya didn't live during the lifetime of the previous Acharya. So we know that there are spiritual masters in between that aren't mentioned. So what's mentioned here, and that's why there are so few, is just the prominent, the most prominent Acharyas. So so the teachings of the Acharya are definitely given a lot more importance. So even though, I may write a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, you may write a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, but still Srila Prabhupada's purports are going to, hold a lot more weight. And, we're only going to write our commentaries based on Prabhupada's commentaries, right? We're not going to put anything different in there. We're just going to present it in a way that's more, maybe more relatable to people. So, yeah, we can't deviate from the Acharya. That's the principle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, De Kirtan.
So, on the topic of guru, what do you advise for those who are not initiated yet and are kind of in that in-between? There's a lot of talk of it not. It's kind of like training until you actually commit and get a guru. It's like you're not really like. There's that kind of talk, where it's like not really started until you get a guru. And I agree with that. And at the same time, I don't feel like I am ready to commit to that. Not because I don't want to, but because I take it seriously and I know that I would not maybe be able to honor the commitments of that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you just speak to what to do in this in-between stage, and also, even if I don't feel ready, do you just do it anyways, type thing, and just looking for...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. There are some quotes that say that, that bhakti starts at initiation. That, whatever is done without, if you don't take initiation, then, you're not making advancement in your bhakti. The initiation is so important. But then we see that, there are people who are coming to Krishna consciousness, like yourselves, and, many here who are not initiated, and they're chanting, and they're reading, and they're serving, and we can see that they're making spiritual advancement. So what's going on? That's one question. And there's another. It's kind of like two questions in one, so I'll address both aspects. So the way I explain this is that it's like planting a garden, right? So so before you plant the garden, you have to prepare the soil. You need to clear out all the brush and weeds and garbage and stones and things that are lying in the field that hasn't been used for a long time. So for lifetimes we haven't actually used our field. We've just been doing material stuff. We haven't actually been cultivating spiritual life. So there's a lot of accumulation there. People have been throwing their garbage there, and so we have to clear all that out first, and then we need to plow. Then we need to really dig in, turn the soil, and then when we turn the soil, we might find more, an old plastic bag, an old like Coke can or something from 100 years ago, or more big stones. You take those out, and then we need to fertilize. So then you got to work in your compost or your cow dung, so all that before you even plant the seed. And if you don't do that before planting the seed, if you just throw the seed on that, overgrown, full of brush and weeds and garbage and plastic bags, if you just put it there, the seed, it might sprout, because seeds will sprout as soon as they get wet, but it's not going to do well. It's going to suffer. It's probably going to die. So in the same way, if we take initiation prematurely, then it's like putting the seed on the grassy, overgrown field. So everything that we're doing before initiation is preparing the soil. But if you prepare the soil nicely, you clear it all out, you plow it up nicely, you fertilize it nicely, but you never plant the seed, then it's useless. So that's the point. That's why the scriptures say that the service that you do before initiation is useless, because if you never actually take initiation, then you don't have the connection to parampara. It's the process of diksha, initiation, formal acceptance by a guru that connects you to this chain of disciplic succession, which connects you to the flow of mercy that's coming down from Krishna through that chain of gurus and disciples. So that's very important. So then in terms of guru, what to do when you're not initiated. So in ISKCON, we're very fortunate because we have such a powerful acharya, Srila Prabhupada. So it's recommended that we take shelter of Srila Prabhupada. And we take Srila Prabhupada as our Shiksha Guru. Shiksha means instructing, and Diksha means initiating. So Prabhupada is not going to be our Diksha Guru. We're not going to take initiation from Prabhupada because he's not here to give us initiation or accept us as his initiated disciples. But we can all take Shiksha from Srila Prabhupada because his instructions are still accessible through his purports, through his lectures, his conversations, and what's passed down through his disciples. So, and by taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada as our Shiksha Guru, then we can very confidently practice bhakti, and we can have all the tools at our disposal to plow the field and prepare the soil. And then by the blessings of Srila Prabhupada, by his mercy, then we'll be guided to one of his disciples or grand disciples now to take Diksha. And we'll be connected to him through that line. So it's not that Prabhupada's not our guru. Prabhupada is our guru, but he's our Shiksha Guru. Because he's still there, he's still in the line, right? He's still like, if you're a disciple of Jayapataka Swami, so your Diksha Guru is Jayapataka Swami, but then your Param Guru, your Shiksha Guru, is still you're still in the line with Prabhupada. So you're still connected to Prabhupada. It's not that Prabhupada's not there for you. And Prabhupada said that actually the grandfather is even more merciful to the child than the father. So he said that to his disciples. He said, it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's appearance day, and he said that you all are so fortunate because my guru is very merciful. but he's like my spiritual father, but he's like your spiritual grandfather. And everybody knows that the grandfather is more kind to the grandchildren than he was to his own children. He spoils them like anything, right? He never punishes them. So he said that, whatever you do, you're going to get so much mercy from my guru. So in the same way, as Prabhupada's grand disciples, we're actually in a better situation than his direct disciples because, we have this kind, loving, compassionate, pure devotee, Shakti Vaishavatar grandfather who's just showering us with so much mercy. So while our Diksha Gurus chastise us and put us in line. So it's a perfect situation. We're very, very fortunate. So we shouldn't throw away the good fortune that we have. We should just stick with this process, the process that Krishna gave, the process that Krishna upholds, that Prabhupada taught, that Prabhupada wanted, and by which we can be very confident, very well situated and secure in bhakti, and we can go back to Godhead.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
All right, I better end here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, ISKCON Guru Vrinda ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaura Premanandi.